You would echo Buffett's sentiment that this is disgusting.
I certainly do. We're at the fiscal end game. From here, it's going to be chaos, unrelenting, unremitting. Nothing will happen before the election. Obama has staked out the top 2% Bush cuts as the defining issue of the campaign.
Yeah, you saw that a few weeks ago.
When we get into the lame duck, there's no possibility of a grand bargain. When you're faced with a $1 trillion sequester on spending, hitting defense hard, upwards of $500 billion of tax cuts all expiring all over the place, not just the Bush cuts, but the payroll tax holiday and so forth. And then you're going to be out of debt ceiling. We raised the debt ceiling to $16.3 trillion. It'll be all used up. So you're going to face those three things in a lame duck session.
It'll all get built up by the end of the year.
It'll all be used up by the end of the year. And so therefore they can't go backwards, they can't go forwards. I think this is going to be an event that we have never seen before.
David,
how it comes out, I think, is hard to predict.
The people we talk to, though, even the lawmakers on the Hill and the economists and those who've been in Washington for a while say, though, eventually it will all get solved. It will. So what's the real cost here?
The real cost is uncertainty that's going to get worse. I think when people tell you it's all going to get solved, they're not explaining how. The way it's going to get solved is by one bump in the road after another, partial solutions, 3-month extensions, 11th hour crises over extending the debt ceiling or continuing resolutions, partial temporary extensions of the tax cut or of the sequester being deferred.
So
none of
all
this
that
will
punting
it'll be
down
punt. Kick the can. It's going to go on for the entire next term.
Okay,
next term.
All right, so then this economy then stays mired in the doldrums.
I think it's going to be worse because we will be in recession by the time the lame duck session.
You think this wrangling is going to drive us into recession?
I think we're heading into it right now. The numbers are so weak that there's a pretty good chance we're in recession already, and it will be retroactively declared. If it isn't, we're drifting into it. When they relook at the budget numbers with a realistic outlook with a recession built in, before, it was 12 years, no recession for 12 years, the numbers are going to be far worse, and then the political environment is going to say, well, we can't possibly raise taxes in a recession. We can't possibly cut spending. So it's actually going to get far worse.
There's a Gallup poll out. I think it surveyed people between July 9th and 12th, so just last week, asking them their approval rating of Congress. So 16% said that they approve, a paltry 16%. 78% say they disapprove of what Congress is doing. They call it a do-nothing Congress. So why aren't the lawmakers hearing that even more?
Well, I can't understand why the 16% approve. I mean, there's nothing to approve. I will note that I was a member of Congress in 1979, and we had a 20% approval rating. So it hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse over time. The problem is
well, in the 70s, we were in a recession.
But then at least there were solutions worked out, compromises made. Even Social Security was saved in 1982, 83, when President Reagan and Speaker O'Neill agreed reluctantly. Today, we are totally paralyzed. There is no consensus. We have an ideological divide on taxes and entitlement like we've never had before. And when we talk about the debt ceiling, the $16 trillion, we've used up all our debt capacity. We can't keep adding at $1 trillion.
Well, we can with interest rates this low.
We can if we want to get ourselves into a jam that we will never get out of. In other words, the debt problem doesn't become a problem until the markets suddenly have a wake-up call and realize if the Fed doesn't keep printing, it's game over. Right now, it's not a vote of confidence that the United States is a safe haven, and therefore they're buying the bond this morning at 1.48 or the 10-year. It's a vote that the Fed isn't going to let anything bad happen to the bond market. If it ever becomes clear...
I don't get that. Okay, wait.
Because the Fed has been medicating and manipulating this bond market, and through Operation Twist, through QE 1, 2, and 3, and so forth, the central banks of the world own $5 trillion of the $11 trillion of debt outstanding. If
it
ever became clear that they were going to stop buying, or they were going to have to start selling down the position, all of the smart money that's in the bond today on leverage, on repo, will sell in a heartbeat, and once the selling starts, it will not be stoppable.
It is true that people say that Operation Twist and the first QE didn't do much for the economy. That is true, and that what it has done instead is bring yields down, and that means that funding for the United States is cheaper and cheaper. I mean, that is true, but
that's perverse, because it's a signal to Congress that you can borrow $1 trillion for $10 billion a year. In other words,
but Dave, I don't get the other side though. So if interest rates were to go up, are you saying? I mean, that's not going to solve the stalemate in Congress.
No, but it's only it'll put some fear and terror back in their mind. It will break ultimately this huge partisan stalemate we have today. There is no cost to stalemate. They can continue month after month, have a fight over the debt ceiling, borrow another $1 trillion, and move on. When the interest rates start moving up, like they did in various countries in Europe, that's when fear sets in.
Right, when you have the vigilantes come in.
Yes, and it will at some point.